The city smelled of bread and gunpowder. Merchants hawked, priests prayed. In alleys the poor traded secrets for crusts of bread. It was the late 1700s, a time when the pen still had teeth, if someone dared to show them. She was nobody the first time she set ink to paper. Paper costs little, her hunger for being heard cost everything. At night, by a lame candle, she folded leaflets and slipped them under tavern doors. Nobody expected much. Nobody expected everything. She called herself a seamstress, a mother, a troublemaker, names that meant bills and work. On paper, she became a voice. She did not craft slogans for applause. She wrote sentences that stuck plain, blunt, dangerous in their honesty. Her first leaflet asked one small question: who owns a life? A nervous printer ran 50 copies for a promise and a raw look. That was the beginning. One copy became 10. 10 became hundreds. By the time magistrates noticed, the lines were already read in taverns and kitchens, on street corners and under covers. Her phrases were short and sharp. They started conversations those in power did not want. The question spread: if some men could claim rights, why not everyone? Real talk, that line cut deep. People read them aloud, then tucked the leaflets into pockets like contraband. Words moved faster than mounted couriers. A student copied a paragraph and read it aloud in a lecture hall. A shopkeeper tacked a line to his counter. A preacher murmured it in the margins of a sermon. The city hummed with the same question. She never stood in the square. She kept her head down and watched ideas leave her hands and find their own legs. Power smells everything. The city's bigwigs felt their grip loosen. Some were scared, some smelled opportunity. A young orator, hungry and polished, began quoting the leaflets and speeches. He did not credit a pen, he credited a cause. The crowd cheered. The cause found a face that looked good on a stage. She watched from the shadows and knew the script would be rewritten. Meetings turned to marches. A riot flared at the harbor. A militia split. The city stopped whispering and started howling. She never signed manifestos. She kept scribbling, stuffing leaflets into pockets and pouches. It was not glamorous. It was steady work. Her words pushed men to cross lines they hadn't thought to cross. By the time the first barricades rose, folks were calling it a revolution. She watched the smoke with a fierce, awful pride. Her lines had lit that fire. Anonymity was safety. The leaders wanted faces, and men loved a neat hero story. They chose the loudest voice and put him up front, a polished speaker who could fill a hall and take applause. She bit her tongue and kept writing. The movement needed lines more than a name. For now, that would have to be enough. When leaders started winning small fights, they rewrote origin stories. They lifted lines from her leaflets and repackaged them as speeches. Her words were gold now, but she was not invited to the bank. Her name drifted like smoke. People give medals to faces, not pen strokes. That sting was quiet and sharp. They did not arrest her in daylight. They silenced her with paperwork and protocol, a warning left at her door, printers refusing her work, a smear in the newspapers. The rumor mill turned. She kept writing, but the channels dried up. The city's appetite for neat stories had a price. The messy truth gets shoved aside. Not everyone folded. A clerk in the assembly, young, careful, willing to risk a promotion, tucked her leaflets into pockets where it mattered. He whispered her lines to ears that could not be bought. He lost pay raises and favors for it. Sometimes being anonymous is strategy. He kept her words moving like contraband, slow, but alive. The revolution burned bright and hot. Fire burns what it touches. Riots turned ugly. The city bled. Friends fled. Some were jailed. She watched people she loved, dragged off by patrols while the men on the podium got medals. Pride and grief braided inside her. She began to think about legacy, not for glory, but so the dead could have names beside their graves. As victory neared, officials curated a clean story. Monuments were planned. A commission wrote the official history. The orator was given the role of authoring the public record. Her leaflets lived on, but under other signatures. They polished the past so it fit a statue. That is Propaganda 101. Tidy narratives sell better. They did not kill her with a sword. They erased her with indifference and paper. Printers withheld. Allies left town. Gossip painted her as a troublemaker. Slowly, town records and toasts left her out. The clerk kept a hidden stack of originals, but public memory moved on. People began to quote the orator like scripture. She became a footnote, if that. They held a ceremony in the new hall marble. Banners, the kind of pomp that smells like victory and not regret. The orator, resplendent, accepted a medal to applause. The history books were drafted that night, with one voice loud and the others muffled. She watched from too far to be seen, and clapped like everyone else. It hurt like hell. Later, scholars would find familiar turns of phrase in the margins of those official drafts. Someone had traced her structure and polished the edges. Her handwriting lived in marginal ink and scrawls only a patient eye could match. Real history is messy, theft, homage, and convenience braided together. Years do what years do. They soften pain's edges and sharpen the edges of monuments. The city rebuilt. Children played in streets that once bled. Teachers read the official story. The clerk grew older and kept the leaflets like contraband relics. He taught his grandchild a line or two, whispering, "Credit goes where credit's due, kiddo." But for most, the statue stayed the story. The clerk never sold the leaflets. He slipped them into a trunk and left them there, knowing someday someone might read them and see the truth. He wanted justice, not applause. That small hope in a trunk was quiet, stubborn, and human. Decades later, a careful scholar compared drafts and handwriting. He found slanted sevens and neat twos that matched the hidden leaflets. He wrote a footnote. The footnote became a paper. A few historians dug deeper. The ledger of memory started to tip, slow as molasses, but tipping nonetheless. Statues still bore the orator's name, but in journals and footnotes her name began to surface. No parade announced it. No medals came. That does not make it small. History's corrections matter. People who once cheered for a shiny man began quietly to whisper her name. The whisper gathered shape. The city learned, little by little, to hold both the hero and the debt. She is not on the plaques. She is not in the portraits. But when you read certain lines from that era, if you listen, really listen, you'll hear her cadence, quick, clean sentences that cut to a point. That is how some people live on, not in marble, but in the way we still say things. Next time a line rings true, ask who first said it. Don't let the loudest voice be the only voice. That's how fire is stolen, and how it gets returned. Say her name. Say it slow. Say it right. If you're ready for more real talk about getting video, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell.